Hello, thank you for joining the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs, where today we're doing our Wednesday webinar where we will give you 10 tips to become a savvy consumer. So we'll kind of go over a range of topics here, but hopefully by the end of the presentation, you'll have a little bit better understanding of some easy, simple things that you can do to be a little bit smarter maybe about how you use your money and your information. Now I want to get you into the meat of this presentation. And again, we're going to be talking about 10 different tips that you can use to become a savvy consumer. And our first tip is something that you're already doing just by being here today and taking part in our webinar. So our first tip is to stay educated. And I know that sounds a little cheesy, but education is one of the most important things you can do to be a savvy consumer and protect your own rights. So, it may be taking part in a presentation like this or reading materials offered by our agency, or maybe going to another agency like the Federal Trade Commission. They have a great deal of information on their consumer website as well. But kind of the important thing with this is just to stay involved and kind of know what's happening around a lot of these issues. And your bank and your credit unions, those types of financial institutions, probably have some financial literacy sections as well on their websites. So kind of take advantage of any of these things that are out there, but you want to make sure you're using reputable sources and that kind of stuff. So stick, we always say those government websites, if it's state or federal, and kind of use those as kind of that tool that are trusted, true websites will kind of give you that correct information. I know sometimes people tell us they use AI searches on things and they're maybe pulling up information that isn't quite up to date or isn't quite as accurate as we would like. So just kind of make sure you're using those reputable sources when you're looking up all that information. And I want to kind of point you to these links. So if you've downloaded our slides, these will all work for you. So you can sign up for our email updates, and that's going to send you all the information about our webinars. We'll also send you any news releases, scam alerts, those types of things that South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs puts out. You can also use that order free brochures button there, and that'll take you to our process to be able to request any of these brochures that we have. We have a lot of information, cybersecurity basics, credit reports guide, our ditch the pitch guide is also one of those, and you'll see that button there as well. And that link will take you where you can download that that booklet, but you can also request that as a physical book as well. And you can take a look at that, and that will give you a lot of information on guarding against scams. And as I talk about our publications, again, you can go to our website, consumer.sc.gov, and request those. We will mail them to you around the state free of charge. Usually we kind of limit those at 50. So if you have a community group, maybe a library, church, Boy Scout, Girl Scout group, any of those types of things, whatever the case may be, we will send up to 50 of those to you. And again, Ditch the Pitch is probably our most popular guide. We also have our identity theft prevention guide, our credit report book, and a lot of other books that we have as well. So you can either download those at consumer.sc.gov, or you can also have those physical copies shipped to your group. One of our next tips, get a copy of your credit report. Again, that's an important step that you can do at least once a year. You want to look through those and make sure everything on your credit report is accurate. And that's going to help you to spot those signs of identity theft that might be out there. So again, you want to look, make sure it's accurate. We say complete and up to date. So what I mean by that is any loans that you have that they're all actually listed, that would be that complete file that you want. So look for those, make sure that they're actually things that you've opened up. It will give you kind of that list of names, addresses, phone numbers, anything that you've used when you've applied for any type of line of credit, things like that. If it's got a list of like your car payments, things like that, it should show you, maybe what that entire loan for that car is, what your monthly payment is, and kind of what you have left on that loan. So all those things should be listed in there. And if you're seeing things that don't belong to you, again, that's that sign of identity theft. And you want to go ahead and dispute any of those errors and inaccuracies as soon as you can with the credit reporting bureaus. And kind of the site that we recommend using is annualcreditreport.com. And that's going to give you access to your reports from Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. you, again, want to look at these at least once a year. You can do that a little bit more often now. They'll offer you those free credit reports every week through that website. So go through those every so often and kind of just make sure everything's accurate again. And we recommend annualcreditreport.com because it is authorized by federal law. So federal law kind of sets some of those rules for how they can use your information, what they can't do with your information with that. So that's kind of why we recommend that. I know there are a lot of other free ways you can get your credit reports through websites and stuff, but some of those information, some of those sites may be set up to kind of get particular details about your financial information, and they may be using that in a way that you don't want them to. So that's kind of why we recommend annualcreditreport.com to take a look at those reports from the 3 major credit bureaus. And we also want to encourage you to go ahead and place a security freeze on your credit reports. And I encourage people to do that because that's one of the best things you can do to prevent other people from using your information. And that's particularly helpful if you're getting notices about security breaches and things like that. Make sure you've gone in and put a security freeze on your credit reports, because if somebody has information about you, some of those financial details and personal identifying pieces of information, they can use that to open up different credit cards, debts, things like that in your name, and you want to be able to stop them from doing that. So again, the freeze is going to be free to place. It's also free to lift. So if you need to open up new lines of credit, you'll need to lift it, but it's a great tool you can do. And again, it's going to stop other people from accessing that information and using it, so they're not able to open up new lines of credit in your name. And if you find out that you need to open up some kind of new line of credit, like I tell people, I had to get a new internet provider not too long ago, and when I did that, they wanted to run a credit check of me, just to make sure I was fine to send that piece of equipment to and all that. So before I put in that application with them, I did have to lift that credit freeze on my accounts. So once I did that, I was able to put in that application. They sent me my device and all that. So it's quick, easy to do. But you do have to go to all 3 of the major credit bureaus in order to do that. So you can either give them a call, or you can go to their websites, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, put that freeze in place with each of those 3 credit bureaus. And again, it's going to be a great tool you can do. So if somebody has information about you, some of those personal identifying information, kind of like your credit, or not credit card number, your social security number, maybe they have information about your addresses and your names, date of birth, and things like that from a security breach. Putting this freeze in place is going to kind of prevent somebody from using that information without your knowledge. So you'll get an alert. I know I've got a freeze on mine. I got an alert from experiencing and somebody tried to open a credit card in my name. It wasn't me. So luckily that freeze was in place and it put a stop to that. So that's a great tool. Saved me a lot of headache and a lot of frustration. I'm sure if somebody would open a credit card in my name, I would have had to deal with all kinds of trouble, I'm sure. But that freeze was in place and it was a great tool to stop that from happening. So I encourage everybody to do that. Another easy thing you can do is go to opt out of some of these pre-screened offers. And this is going to help you reduce some of the junk mail maybe that you get too. So that's kind of another advantage of this. But what I mean by this is sometimes you might get all these offers maybe for credit cards, insurance, things like that, and basically you've been pre-screened, pre-qualified for these types of offers, and you're getting them in the mail because these companies have looked at your credit report. So basically what they're doing, maybe it's an insurance company, something like that, they're kind of going through and they're looking for people that might qualify for their product. So they're asking the credit bureaus to go through reports and look at credit history, credit scores, things like that. And they're giving them, the credit bureaus are giving them a list of these potential customers who might kind of meet the requirements that these companies have asked for. So basically you're taking your name off this list. So if you go to optoutprescreen.com, you can put in the information and get your name taken off this list, so credit bureaus aren't giving your name, contact information to these companies to be able to try to sell you these products. And you can also call that phone number that's listed there, 1-888-567-8688. And again, optoutprescreen.com. And again, that's going to be a great tool. Nothing else. It just kind of stops you from getting a lot of mail that you're not necessarily interested in, but it will stop a lot of those pre-screened and pre-qualified offers that you might get in the mail. And it can kind of help you reduce some of those urges to open up new credit cards, things like that, that you may not necessarily be thinking about until you get it into the mail. And one of the things I can encourage folks to do, and it sounds funny, actually read contracts, right? So you want to know all the small print details that we all kind of glance over and maybe don't pay attention to all the time, but you want to make sure you read, understand every contract that you might be planning to sign. You want to do that before you sign it, of course. And if you have questions, you want to ask about it, kind of talk that out with the person that you're doing business with. But in some cases, you may want to even get an attorney involved and have them look over things, especially if you're unsure about it. A lot of times just doing that on the front end, it may cost you a little bit of money to have an attorney looking at it, but depending on what that situation is, it may be worth it on the front end. Again, if you have any kind of questions about it, you want to make sure all those are addressed before you sign it and all that. But you also want to make sure both you and the other party signs that contract. And you also want to kind of make sure all the blanks are filled in too before you do that, right? And get a copy of it and all of that. So you just kind of want to protect yourself with that. So you don't want to leave anything open-ended for that other person. So make sure anything that's blank is actually filled in. Make sure you and the other person signs it. And that's just going to give you a lot more protection, right? So you want to have these things in place. So if something goes wrong, it's not just your word against theirs. And those written contracts are going to give you a little bit of protection in order to do that. And sorry, I advanced my screen a little bit early there. I was trying to scroll down to my notes and it advanced. Sorry about that. But kind of the thing I'd also encourage you on there, I don't really have a bullet point for it, but you just kind of want to look through these contracts, make sure you also understand any payment process that's involved with that. Hopefully it should be kind of outlined in the contract. But if you're also dealing with anything, you want to make sure that it's, written out if there's any upfront fees, if there's a refund policy, any of that type of stuff. So make sure you kind of understand all of those little details, especially refund policies, upfront fees, if there's a payment structure, what that payment structure would be like, how often you pay, how much it is, and all that type of stuff. You want to do that beforehand. And it's also just kind of one of those things too, I like to point out. Big thing to remember is that it's your money. You get to decide how you spend that. So if you don't really like the details in a contract like that, you can always do business somewhere else. So, that contract's that thing that can kind of outline a lot of those processes for you. So make sure you understand all that, make sure you're comfortable with it before you sign that contract and move forward. And I kind of hinted at this a little bit, but our next tip is the background of business. So if you've got a business that you're maybe not that familiar with and you're about to hand over some money, you want to do a little research, right? So one of the things you might want to do is kind of do some of those online searches, look for complaints, look for reviews, look for scams. So you might want to do a search online, put the word scam after it, or maybe put the word complaint after it. You can also put the word review. You can also go through their social media. A lot of times in some of these social media groups, people will let you know if there's a problem with the business. So you can kind of go through those and get an idea of kind of what the business is, what their reputation is, how they respond to maybe people's complaints and those types of things. You also want to kind of make sure to, if it's somebody that might be claiming to be local, look up to see if they have those physical business addresses, things like that. Maybe look at the map results for that location as well. Make sure there's actually a building there that makes sense with what that business claims they're doing. Again, these are things you can always do if you're kind of unfamiliar with the business, but you want to look at these things, see if they're addressing any of these questions or problems. And one of the kind of resources I like to point out to people is the business lookup on consumer.sc.gov. So we've got a lot of different resources that will help you find information about licenses and complaints, and I'll kind of show you a quick look at that real quick. So again, that licensee lookup is a spot you can go to and see if there are industries that SCDCA regulates or licenses. So you can click that little licensee lookup, and I'll show you that here in a second. But you'll also see that little chart there, the table that has the other state agencies that oversee specific industries and licenses and regulations. So that's a good resource to take advantage of as well. And I like to point that out because a lot of times people come to us and then, they're dealing with an issue that maybe another state agency regulates and enforces, and state law kind of mandates a lot of that. So if somebody comes to us with something like an insurance issue, most likely we would have to refer that to the Department of Insurance. So they're going to be the ones that deal with a lot of those insurance related questions that people might have. So, might be a lot faster for you to start with the Department of Insurance instead of us referring the complaint or the issue to them. So, that's a good resource to take advantage of too. Start there. And if you have like a food, maybe safety issue, maybe it's something going on where you think a restaurant may not be as clean or whatever, Department of Agriculture is going to be the place to do that. They kind of look at those food rating issues and inspection type issues. So Department of Agriculture would be somebody who deals with that. The Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation, LLR, they're the ones that we kind of refer to a good bit because they deal a lot with contractors, real estate agencies, I believe hair salons and stuff like that as well. So they have a kind of a wide range of industries that they're looking at. So also would encourage you to go through their licensee, look up and see if it's an industry that maybe LLR deals with, because a lot of times that is the case in our state. But when you're looking at SCDCA, again, this licensee you look up will kind of give you a list of that. So you'll see on this little drop down some of those industries that we regulate. So you'll see everything about athlete agents, pawnbrokers, pre-need funeral contract providers, physical fitness service providers as well. So there's good kind of variety of different agencies or industries that we regulate and kind of license as well. So you can kind of go through those. If you click those lists, like if you click the athlete agents or motor clubs, any of those, it will bring up an Excel sheet that will show you all of the businesses in that industry that are licensed with our agency. So that's a great way to kind of look up a little bit of information about a particular industry that you might be dealing with. And I'm going to show you this one last screen on that. And I kind of like to refer people to this search complaints tool. So that's a great place you can go. You can kind of go through that, and it goes through all of the complaints that have been filed with our agency. So you can pull up a business and you'll see the number of complaints that might have been filed with that business. And then you can kind of click in that and see a general summary of what's happened. It's not going to show you any of those details about the person that filed the complaint. So you won't see, another person's name or their address, anything like that. But you will see some information about the issue that that consumer had with the business, and you'll be able to see how that business responded as well. So that might give you an idea of kind of how that company reacts to some of those things that might be happening. Tell people too, it might be encouraging. You could see something, maybe it's a larger company and you'll see a large number of complaints, or but that would make sense, right? So if they're a gigantic company, they probably would have a number of complaints because they're dealing with a gigantic number of people. So you can kind of take a look at that and also kind of see if they're responding, how they're responding, and what the case may be with that. And this other little tool that's kind of helpful as well, some of those rates, charges, and fees you'll see on there. We have motor dealer closing fees. Those are kind of important to look at. So if a car dealership is charging a closing fee, you can kind of take a look at some of those, maybe compare them to other dealerships. And you can also take a look at some of those interest rates that we have listed there and those little bullet points as well. So you can kind of go through, and it's kind of important to point out that it's a maximum rate. So if the company is charging over 18%, those listings are filed with us, and you can kind of go through that Excel sheet that's on there and kind of look at maybe what those maximum rates are that that company might be charging. And our next tip is one that I'd say we all kind of deal with, right? Hang up on those unwanted calls. I know people always tell me my phone will not stop ringing and I don't know how to deal with these calls. But if you're answering these phone calls, you want to hang up on them as soon as you can. Kind of the best advice would be don't answer these phone calls. You don't want them to get through to begin with. But if you're getting a lot of them, I'm going to give you a little couple quick tips on this. And the best one, again, if it's a robocall, especially, you want to make sure you hang up. And you don't want to press any of those numbers or call them back. And kind of the reason we say that is you don't really know kind of what those are going to, right? So if you're pressing numbers, you may be getting them put in touch with somebody that you don't particularly want to talk to, and they may be trying to sell you something you don't need, or it could be potentially a scammer on the other end of the line. So you don't want to really get involved in a lot of those conversations. Always tell people, take advantage of those features that are built in your phone. Your phone maybe have something, especially a cell phone, where it will send calls that aren't in your contact list straight to voicemail. That's fine to do. I know a lot of times people tell me they're waiting on those calls from their doctor's offices and things like that. They're a little bit worried about doing that. Maybe your doctor's office can tell you what that phone number is that's going to come through when they give you a call. So you can go ahead and put those into your phone as well. Because I know if they're like my doctor's office, they probably have a couple of different phone lines that they use to send those calls out. But, maybe they'll provide you those numbers. You can put those in your phone and have those where they don't, get caught by that filter. But those filters will help you greatly reduce the number of calls that you're having, to deal with. And a lot of times, if there are these scammers and bad businesses, they're not going to leave you a voicemail most of the time. So hopefully just having these things to kind of catch those calls before they get through will really help. There are call blocking services. Phone providers have these. If you click the link that is on the slide presentation there, it's going to take you to a good link that will be able to kind of help you look at what your phone provider may offer. That's a link from the Federal Trade Commission. So they've put together a list of a lot of different phone providers and some of the call blocking services and things that they offer. I'd also say, if you're using a landline, some of these call blocking services are available on landlines. You may also have to talk to your phone provider and see kind of if they have a device that they might recommend or something else that they have. Some of those are additional services, but they can help you kind of reduce some of those phone calls that you're getting. And we also encourage people to sign up to the Don't Call registry, the Do Not Call registry at donotcall.gov. And I know a lot of people have strong feelings about that, but it's kind of important to note it's not going to stop all the sales calls you receive. There are different types of calls too that aren't covered by Do Not Call. Charities, political groups, some things like that are not kind of covered by donotcall.gov. So, it's not going to stop all of the calls you receive, but it might kind of give you a good idea if somebody's a scammer. If you're not kind of expecting those phone calls and you're signed up to Do Not Call and you haven't given those people permission to call you, might tell you that it's either a scammer or a business that you don't particularly want to maybe do business with. So those are all things that can kind of help you decide or not if you want to deal with somebody, especially if they're trying to sell you stuff over the phone. But kind of that big rule that we always tell people, if you don't recognize the number on caller ID, don't pick it up. Just let it go to voicemail. That's always one of those great things you can do. And best way to do that, sign up donotcall.gov, mention that. And you can also give them a call. They will let you register more than one number at a time, but you can only put 3 on the list at a time. So if you have multiple phone numbers that you're looking through there, you might have to go through that process, more than once. They do have a pretty good frequently asked question that kind of goes through a lot of those rules about donotcall.gov, because again, there are rules about when you give permission to people to call and who doesn't, fall under those blanket donotcall.gov rules. But you can also file those complaints on donotcall.gov too. So if you've signed up, you can kind of submit those complaints about those people who maybe are calling you nonstop or things like that. So that is a great tool to take advantage of. And I encourage you to do that. And if you're still getting a lot of phone calls and junk messages on your phone, take advantage of those little features that are on your phone. I know this was an example of a scam text message I got from somebody pretending to be the post office. And they'll laugh. I always use this as a good example. We're not really talking about scams at this point, but you'll notice kind of that link on there is not anything associated with the post office. I actually cut off kind of part of the end because I don't want anybody to click on that or anything. And you'll see the ridiculous message at the bottom of there about copying and pasting things into your browser, right? That's kind of crazy. But take advantage of that report jump button. You should have something that also looks like this when either you're getting text messages or phone calls. You can kind of swipe over on those calls and use that delete and report junk function. And basically you're notifying the phone carriers, your phone provider, that something's going on with this person that's messaging you. You don't recognize it, it's spam. And then they can take additional steps to look at those types of calls. If they're getting a lot of reports about the same numbers and those same messages that are getting through, they can take a look at it and take additional steps to kind of help filter those or hopefully track down some of the information about the people who are sending all those mass messages about this junk. And we also encourage you to use strong passwords and multi-factor authentication. And I always tell people, and that two-factor or multi-factor authentication, the FBI tells us that's the best thing you can do to kind of double up your security. They say it makes it twice as hard for a scammer to get into your account, even if they've gotten your password. But as you're writing those passwords or figure them out, make sure they're long, make sure they're different from each other. So we say strong and unique, right? You want to use uppercase, lowercase letters, numbers, symbols. They tell us random is best. So anything you can do to make them kind of not a word, that's kind of the recommended thing now. So maybe it's a phrase that you've gone through. A lot of people in our office tell us they use, passage of a book, and they'll go through, maybe the first line or the last line and put all those letters from that into their password. So find something like that that works for you. But a password manager may be the best way to kind of remember all those different complex passwords for all of those accounts. You can kind of use those password managers also to kind of monitor if you're reusing passwords, but they'll also help you kind of monitor if there's security breaches involving those passwords as well. So they'll let you know if there's a problem with a lot of those, if they've been reported as potential breaches, and they'll kind of recommend when you might need to change some of those passwords. So those are great tools you can take advantage of to do that. And as we talk about multi-factor authentication, please make sure you've got those set up, especially social media, email, financial accounts. Hopefully, a lot of these accounts are already requiring you to have multi-factor authentication, but we kind of encourage you to take advantage of that. It's usually something you have, like a passcode to get in, or maybe something you are, kind of like your fingerprint, your face scan. Again, here's kind of another little quick example of that. We use, say, kind of that knowledge factor might be something like a PIN or an additional password that you put in, or a security question. Sometimes it's that possession factor, and here at work, we use our smartphones where it has an app that kind of puts up a message, and you then have to have something from that phone message that gets you into that account. And some computers will have that hardware token, so you plug in that little thumb drive that's going to give you that additional step to get into those accounts. Those are all things you can do. Probably the most often offered one that I always have now is that face recognition. So that's that kind of something you are factor. So you're using your face to kind of get that second step to get into those accounts. But really take advantage of these, look at what these providers offer, and maybe make a choice on the method that works best for you. So if you're not comfortable with the face scan, or your phone, whatever, doesn't have that option, you can also do those PIN numbers that are, texted to you or whatever, but just find that additional step and take advantage of it, because again, it's going to kind of keep those scammers and hackers out of your account, even if they're able to get a hold of your password somehow. Our next tip is to keep your private information private. And that sounds kind of obvious, right? But, kind of our number one rule whenever we're talking about all this stuff is you don't want to give your personal financial information over to somebody if you can't actually verify that they claim, who they claim they are. You want to make sure you're not just giving that information over to people randomly, especially if it's a text message or phone call you're getting out of the blue. You don't want to give them any of that information if you can't verify 100% that they are who they claim to be. And a lot of times, it's those phishing text messages, emails that we're getting where they're pretending to be somebody else, and then they're asking you for all those details about you, so they're trying to get into your, maybe your financial accounts, or they're trying to get those passwords, or any of those different types of stuff. But kind of the important rules to think about with these text messages and emails: you don't want to call, text, or reply to messages that you weren't expecting. If you don't know that it's actually the person that they're claiming to be, don't respond to them. And you definitely don't want to click any links or provide any of those financial information, login account information, things like that. So if they're telling you you've got to click a link and verify, your login information, to get those quite a bit recently, you don't want to do that, right? So you don't want to provide them information to be able to get into those accounts. And if you're actually worried about any type of purchase or anything like that, that they're claiming to be, like if they claim to be your bank, go to your bank's website or their app using those links that work. I kind of encourage people to use those apps a lot of times because you've already downloaded that. It's kind kind of that tried, true, trusted way to get in. It's also a good way to get a hold of those companies as well. So if you've got to call somebody, use those phone numbers that maybe are on a bill or back of your credit card, debit card, those types of things. So again, you're kind of using those methods that you know are verified and you know they're tried and true. You're using those ways to communicate with those companies and not the random message that you get. But also kind of think about what you post online before you do it. You might want to kind of consider about what those posts reveal, and you might also be revealing information about other people, right? So I know sometimes our family members post various things about each other on their social media accounts and things like that, but just kind of think about what this post means, how it might impact somebody else. I know sometimes even on social media, people can get information about relatives and use those in different types of scams. They may realize who children are, grandchildren, things like that, and use those for those family emergency type scams and those different types of things. So really just kind of think about what that information is, and always encourage people, make all these accounts private if you can, right? So people that you don't know aren't able to get access to that. So you're only allowing followers that you know in real life, and you're not allowing other people to see that information. And of course, you want to use all of these things, like if you're setting up passwords, security questions, any of that type of stuff, you don't want to have those details on social media that might help people guess all those types of things. We always say pets and things like that are often our passwords. So if you're posting about your pets' names and all of that on social media, you're kind of opening up yourself to those potential attacks on your accounts if that is your password and you're sharing that information. But again, you also want to own those online identities. Go through all of your accounts, set those privacy, security settings. Again, you want to kind of set those things to something you're comfortable with. So if you're getting a new device, kind of go through those, make sure, any of the default settings are kind of what you want, and change the ones that you don't like necessarily. But you want to do this kind of regularly. And the reason we say that is sometimes some of these updates, when you're going through and updating your phone or updating the apps that are on the phone, sometimes they might kind of check some of these settings, or maybe they're new settings, right? They've kind of updated their program and their software and they're offering something new. So that might be something you want to look at, see what kind of information they're either gathering or how that information is being shared. Just kind of take a look at those things and update them regularly, kind of go through and check all those lists and make sure that all these different privacy settings are what you actually want in those apps. And kind of our last tip, if you've been on our presentations before, you've heard us say all these signs about a scam, but they're always very important to kind of go over. So we always encourage you to know the signs of the scam. And we tell people, these scams change all the time. So it's kind of hard to know exactly what is going on with particular scams, or kind of those new things that they're doing, because we always hear about crazy new things that scammers have come up with to trick people. But if you know kind of common red flags of these scams, it will help you avoid becoming a victim of them. So one of those things that we always tell people, they're going to pretend to be somebody somebody you recognize. So they're using those spoofing where they're making their phone look like somebody else, right? So they do that so they think you'll kind of interact with them, right? So if you think they're somebody else, you're more likely to answer the phone. But usually that's somebody somebody you recognize. So it's those companies that you've used throughout the years, maybe as a government agency, any of those types of things. So they pretend to be somebody somebody you trust, somebody that you recognize. And they do that to get you, just to answer the phone or maybe reply to that text message. But then they're telling you there's a problem or a prize. So they're doing that to get you kind of worked up, right? So they want you to think either something really good is about to happen or something really bad is about to happen to you. And once you kind of get those emotions going, we know we always don't make the best decisions when that happens. So that's kind of why they do that. And then they're going to tell you you've got to act right away to solve that problem, right? So they're doing that again. They want those emotions going, and then they want you to not kind of think things through. So if you have to act quickly, you're probably making a bad decision, or you're making that decision that you wouldn't have made if you took a few moments to think about it and kind of evaluate the situation, or even talk to somebody else. That's kind of one of the big things they don't want you to do, because they know if you start talking to somebody else about what's happened, you're probably not going to fall victim to that scam. So that's kind of one of those warning signs as well. But if they're telling you you have to act immediately to solve any kind of problem, that's a pretty big red flag. And they'll also have a very specific way that they want you to pay. I always tell people, think about the ways you normally pay for something. If it's a utility bill and they're telling you there's a problem and you got to pay it right away, it should be paid the way you normally pay that utility bill, right? So it should come through the same way as normal, and it shouldn't involve, going to a cryptocurrency ATM or sending gift cards or anything like that. And I always tell people, those prepaid debit cards, gift cards, cryptocurrency, those are kind of those methods that scammers like. They do that because they know if you pay in those methods, it's going to be really hard or about impossible to get that money back once you hand over, those access codes, especially for gift cards and cryptocurrency, things like that. Once you hand that information over, it's basically gone. That money is transferred over to them and they're able to move it around and do all kinds of things with it. And a lot of times they're getting it to another spot in the world very quickly. So, always kind of be cautious of gift cards, prepaid debit cards, those types of things, cryptocurrency. We're also hearing now about barcodes that are being sent to people. So those barcodes, they'll tell you to go to a very specific retailer and they'll say, scan this code, put this amount of money onto this account. And it's basically either going to a prepaid debit card or a gift card or even sometimes cryptocurrency accounts. They'll generally tell you what type of account that code is going into, that barcode. But anytime somebody's telling you to pay in that unusual way, that's kind of that red flag there. So just kind of think about the way you normally pay for those types of services. And if it's something out of the norm, that's kind of that red flag. But again, gift cards, cryptocurrency, debit cards that are prepaid, those types of things are always kind of a warning sign of a scam. And always like to include this information because these purchase scams and things are usually one of the most reported types of scams to our agency. So if you're doing things online, putting in card information, things like that, just kind of keep in mind that a credit card is going to be a lot better to use for than a debit card for those online purchases. And the reason we say that is those consumer protections are a lot stronger for credit cards. So if something goes wrong, you've got a lot more protections on those credit card purchases. And just kind of keep in mind too that those debit cards are a direct line into your bank account. So if something happens, that money's directly out of that bank account, out of that checking account, and that might impact other things that you need that money for. Those credit cards are going to get you that money back onto your account a lot faster. Even if the banks are covering those charges that are made and they say it's fraudulent, we're going to reimburse you, you're going to get that money a lot faster on that credit card than you would on a debit card, most likely. So just kind of keep that in mind. And those credit cards are going to give you a lot more protections for those types of things if something goes wrong. And if you think you're a victim of a scam or identity theft, please let our agency know. That's our phone number, 803-734-4200. Go to consumer.sc.gov. And again, we have that How Do I button. Click that, and it will let you report a scam, report identity theft. And again, our identity theft unit can kind of go through those processes with you, kind of help you walk through that and kind of see what you might need to do to kind of minimize some of that damage. And one of the things they've got that they'll send you is this identity theft toolkit. And they've also got other kind of checklists that they have that are a little specific to the type of identity theft you might be dealing with. So if it's medical identity theft, or if it's something with government benefits, they would be different types of checklists that they would send to you, have you kind of walk through that process, see what you've done, what you need to do, those type of things, and they'll kind of help walk you through that process and guide you through it. Hope you'll join us for a future webinar, and we appreciate you for coming and hope you have a good rest of your day.